This is my Vogue soft tree saddle. It's technically a treeless saddle. It's very much more structured than most treeless saddles on the market, so you've actually got layers of shock and pressure absorbing materials that build up what would be the twist in a treed saddle so that you don't feel straddled, which a lot of treeless saddles do tend to make you feel because you're completely down on the horse and then stretched on a rather wide horse like Ray. It can sort of be quite hard on people's hips. The other thing too, my stirrup bars are much further back on my saddles because the majority of saddles have the stirrup bars around about there. And this is why people are always told by instructors, lower leg back, because they're having to fight a 30-degree angle of the stirrup leather instead of it hanging literally perpendicularly underneath the leg. If I just put that down to sort of somewhere where I would have my stirrup like that, you can see that the leather hangs absolutely perpendicularly down. So if I were to be sitting in the correct ear, shoulder, hip, heel line of balance, that will be entirely underneath my thigh. Now if I just whip this off here, if you can imagine, that's how most saddles are. And so the rider is having to hold that leather back, and instead of actually just being able to sit there in a very easy position and not fight the very tool that's supposed to be assisting them. Now, the seat at the moment is really cold because it's such a cold day, but the whole top is made of memory foam. So the entire seat, cantle, and pommel, the front arch, are made of memory foam, so that it has absolute freedom on the shoulders. There's nothing solid in there whatsoever. The only solid bit that's in here is actually a support for the cantle, so that the rider, if they were going up a very steep hill in a hot climate, as happened to me once in Portugal, I was on a young mare that reared up right on end, going up a very steep slope in one of my earlier saddles, and it was memo to self, I think I'd better make the cantle a bit higher and put something solid in it because I nearly went out the back door. So that's the only solid bit in it apart from the stirrup bars. And you have normal panels underneath it, so that we'll perhaps take that off after Kelly's ridden on it and show that at the end. And so you have a pocketed system of panel inserts, which means that you still have a gullet in the saddle, not so much for spinal clearance, but more for lateral stability in the saddle. It assists with lateral stability, but because the whole saddle is soft, it means that the whole thing literally flexes and moves with the horse's back and doesn't restrict anything. And this in particular, at the front here, when you put your hand down so many treed saddles, it literally grips. And that's when the blood supply is lost there and you start to get atrophy in the horse's withers on either side, because the saddle is too tight, and therefore the blood supply can't get back to it, so the muscle withers and atrophies. And by fitting the saddle, as for instance Monty, who we looked at earlier when Kay was riding him, as I said, he's actually gone up 5 treed saddle sizes in the time that he's been here, because it's allowed the blood supply to get back to the shoulders. And we do advocate padding with certain horses. He has a little bit, because he's got such a big gut after having ulcers some years ago, and unfortunately he does have to eat quite a bit of hay to keep his gut working. If we could perhaps get him hunting fit, I think we'd probably get rid of it, but because you mostly use him as a schoolmaster for the working students, he gets worked more in here. And so his back is a little bit, it's not actually dippy, but it's not particularly up as much as I would like it to. So we tend to use, this in actual fact is a Griffin shimmy pad. So we'll have a look at this, Griffin New Med, which that's a correction pad. So you've got a couple of shims in the back there just to level it up a little bit more. And we do find those are particularly good correction pads, and we've used those for some time with the saddles now. And other than that, we tend to use just one of my back saver pads, which again, it's made from the same memory foam as in the seat, and that will just give a little bit of an extra buffer for a horse that has either a little bit of atrophy or maybe a young horse who's not sufficiently muscled up yet. So that's the basic premise of these saddles. But once Kelly actually gets on this saddle, it will feel extremely hard and it'll sort of perch her up here for the moment. But once she starts to warm it up, then she'll sink into the memory foam so that you feel very much deep and around the horse in it. And the beauty of these saddles is that you can literally put them on just about any horse. They're widen out to the widest, flattest cob, and you can put them on a thoroughbred with quite a lot of severe atrophy with just the addition of a pad. There's no other adjustment to make at all. We advocate a girth. It's an American girth called the Professional Choice. It's actually got a neoprene backing, and this one, in actual fact, I think could be a little bit longer on him. It's which, just see where it's done up on this side. Normally we would have, is it a 28-inch girth that he's got? Yeah. This is the Ventec, Professional's Choice Ventec. And we can probably let it down a little bit more on that side, Tallulah, in a minute and do it up, because we like the dressage girth to be only a couple of inches below the flaps. Because if it's too low down, this is at the moment, the elbow can come back and hit the buckles. And horses have actually been known to either have the elbow chipped or to actually bring the horse down as a result of the elbow coming back and hitting the buckles. So often you see people with dressage girths that are about that long, literally, and they're about that length in total, and the poor horse is hitting his elbows all the time, and then the rider wonders why they're not performing properly. So that's just one thing that is a little tip. On average, a dressage girth should be 20 inches shorter than an English girth. If you had, say, a 48-inch English girth on a normal saddle, you would have a 28-inch on a dressage girth. So that's the Vogue. The underside of the Vogue. So you've still got the gullet, just like a normal saddle. But unlike a normal saddle, you have the pockets, which we have the foam, specially moulded foam panels for us. And funnily enough, made in the same place, actually, in the same town as Rish in India. They're very well known for blow moulding and injection moulding in India too. So yeah, and that's... We almost never have to replace the panels. We haven't found that they do flatten. Just occasionally, if you get somebody that sits really badly and sits over to one side of the saddle, it might flatten a little bit more on one side. But other than that, in general, they're there more or less for the lifetime of the saddle. But it gives you the option, if you ever needed to replace them. So that's the underside of the saddle. And then we have a different three-point girthing system on this saddle, because it's a completely treeless saddle, so to speak. Again, the Velcroed knee rolls, and we do have the hook bars on these, but as I said, the actual construction, you've got the whole top is memory foam, and then underneath that you've got a layer of thick butt leather, which then has the stirrup bars and the girth bullets on either side. You do have webbing that goes over the top as well, but there's no strain on it. It's just purely there as a safety thing. And then you have underneath that, there's a thick layer of white wool felt, which if you run a lorry over it, it won't compress. And then underneath that, you've got a layer of plasters oak foam, which is an EBA type foam used in most saddle construction. And then you've got your panels underneath that. So you've got a whole sandwich of shock and pressure absorbing materials. And I have to say that, this is a very versatile saddle, because you haven't got even a gullet plate in the front. It is a lot more expensive at $15.99, but it's made in England here. And, it has been our top-of-the-range saddle for some time. So, yes, this one obviously has a suede seat. This is a brand-new saddle, in actual fact. And we do them... This is, in actual fact, is the reverse hide of this. This is Italian, very good quality Italian hide. The saddle's made for me by a guy up in Suffolk who was employed by the original company that made the saddles for Manersi and Sons. They're a lovely old family of sheepskin leather clothing manufacturers in the same family for 230 years. Sadly closed down last year. Ray has stayed on to make the saddles for us. And so it's made in a very different way to any other saddle. Most saddlers, you take that into Walsall, they run a mile when you present them with that. It's a very different construction method. So the whole outer carcass is made from the leather, and then the core is built up with layers of pressure and shock absorbing materials and inserted, and then the whole thing is sort of glued and then stitched into place around it. So it's a very different construction, but they've now been on the market since the original one was 2003, and they're still going strong. And a lot of people say, is it going to last as long? Well, they certainly seem to be lasting every bit as long and still perfectly functional, even after a lot of use. So we love them. And we also do, of course, our Flexi saddle, which we'll have a look at after Kelly's ridden Kay. And Every saddle is designed to allow the rider to sit in balance without having to fight the very tool that's supposed to be assisting them. So that is the Vogue.